because these countries are not wealthy enough, powerful enough, and have been kept poor aggressively through colonial exploits. They don't have the tools to be able to combat against this kind of terror. We here in the West look at that and go, oh, it's because they're kind of barbaric and they just can't deal with it. They don't know any better. That's the reason why they're killing each other. You need a Western force to come in and tame the beast. Not dissimilar to how the British colonialists actually presented that argument. You know, the white savior, the white man's burden. If they come in and tame these backwards cultured, violent barbarians.
United States forces have launched missile strikes.
We're going to talk about the Islamic State, but this time not in the Levant or Iraq and Syria, but this time the Islamic State in Africa.
Against the Islamic State group in northwest Nigeria. The US Africa Command said they were carried out in coordination with the Nigerian authorities and killed what it called multiple IS terrorists in Sokoto State. Nigeria says it was involved in the planning of the operation, and the US military posted a video showing a missile being launched from a naval vessel. On social media, President Trump described the Islamic State group as terrorist scum and accused the group of targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians. While speaking to the BBC World Service, the Nigerian foreign minister defended the military action.
What I can confirm is a joint operation between Nigeria and the US that has targeted terrorists. It has nothing to do with a particular religion. It is, as far as we're concerned, targeting terrorists that have been attacking Nigerians, period. So it has nothing to do with one religion or another. And nor does it have anything to do with Christmas. It could be any other day. It is to do with attacking terrorists that have been killing Nigerians.
Well, our reporter in Lagos, Maguochi Okafor, is following developments.
The US has confirmed, even the Nigerian government has confirmed a joint attack in the northwest part of Nigeria, specifically Sokoto State. Now, over the years, for more than a decade, Nigeria has been battling insurgencies, specifically from armed groups and jihadist groups. In November, the US president did say that there was potential that he was going to go in guns a-blazing and carry out strikes potentially in Nigeria. But now we have...
It's so funny that the Nigerian government's like, oh yeah, no, this was totally, we totally also wanted this. What the f are they supposed to say in the situation? Of course they have to play ball. Is Nigeria, you know? Also, I'm not oblivious. Another major oil country. Now, the thing is, ISIS, I think one could say ISIS is, and the Islamic State in general is a Western intelligence-backed operation for the most part. And it's very interesting to see its operations have moved away from the Levant in the region of the Middle East, where Israel has dominated virtually every single country that ISIS was an operation on. ISIS was an operation over. And now they are moving and have been moving to Africa. Okay? They've been moving for a long time. I thought Trump beat ISIS. Yeah, I mean, I guess not. Now, the thing about ISIS is that it just happens to work anywhere where America has any interest in destabilizing or any interest in having control over, because all of a sudden you have these like Salafist groups, you have these Wahhabist groups that are wreaking havoc in a country that does not have the organizational tools or the weapons to be able to just like overcome consistent acts of terror, right? So they have to rely on American military deployment to take care of the problem. Or they happen to operate in a lot of these places. Pure coincidence, by the way. ISIS happens to operate in a lot of places where you have a competitor, another foreign country that also is sending in or deploying their own private military contractors, for example, like the Wagner Group, or countries that have stronger relationships with an American foreign adversary like China. Okay? And of course, as is the case usually with ISIS, the victims are rarely ever Westerners. Now, are there lone wolf attacks that are conducted in the West? Absolutely. But for the most part, the wide majority of the victims are oftentimes either Muslim or Arab themselves, Arab of like different religious background. But the bulk of the ISIS deaths, the bulk of the people that ISIS kills will always be and has always been, not Israel, for example, which is right there, but Muslims, Yazidis, people of Arab descent. And I suspect that the same issues take place in the African continent where ISIS is operating as well. ISIS USA backed is a crazy take. Is it? Saying that ISIS is USA backed is a crazy take. Yeah, it's a crazy take if you don't follow or pay close attention to what the is going on. The do you mean? It's not a direct involvement, okay? The American government is not going to directly involve themselves with ISIS, but they will fund the countries that are then directly involving themselves with ISIS, whether it be Turkey. That was a huge deal a couple of years ago. The guy who actually uncovered the relationship between ISIS and Turkey, even though ISIS literally blows up shit in Turkey as well, by the way. Just remember, who do you think is responsible for that partnership? Do you think Turkey was doing it on their own? No, of course not. Turkey's doing that for America as a NATO country. I mean, the guy who branched off of ISIS, like literally branched off of ISIS, is now the president of Syria. What the f do you think happened there? How do you think that happened? You think you got to come to Jesus moment? This isn't sound analysis. ISIS is a label. There's little to no crossover or real communication between the ISIS in the Sahel and the ISIS in the Middle East or Afghanistan. It's an affiliation by announcement, not organization. There's no evidence so far that the Sahel groups are U.S. backed. I'm not, but notice how you're not saying that there isn't U.S. backing with the ISIS operations in the Middle East. I think you and I both agree and understand that there is U.S. backing, or at least secondary U.S. backing, U.S. allies backing, and offering logistical support to ISIS in the Middle East. I'm simply stating that there is some evidence of that, yeah, especially via intelligence. Yes. So if that's the case in the Middle East, don't you think that it's a little suspicious that a similar relationship might also exist in Africa as well? But the Sahel security situation is extremely different from the Middle East. I'm just saying it's always strange that ISIS rears its ugly head anywhere where America has to intervene. And it's not like America has not intervened or at the behest of Western capital in the past in Nigeria. They quite literally did do that when I believe it was Shell. I believe it was the Shell Corporation when they couldn't get a decent contract or the kind of contract that they wanted from the American government. Actually directly activated tribal leadership and caused similar acts of terrorism. But this ISIS and that ISIS are totally different situations. The Sahel ISIS affiliate institutions have been here for over a decade. I'm just saying that there's a pattern there, and it's one that actually still favors American intervention. Although the Islamic State is not directly affiliated to the Islamic State in the Levant or in Iraq and Syria, I think that the relationship eventually, we will find out, is not that dissimilar. I also follow the Sahel closely and agree with your analysis here. It only is really ISIS by affiliation. The groups have local grievances, mostly no intent to create a caliphate. Guys, I don't think that the ISIS intent to create a caliphate was all that valid either. I think that's just, once again, what do I always say? Religion, or whatever kind of like fundamentalist attitude that one has over their own version of religious interpretation, is simply a galvanizing principle. It is not the main point, okay? It's a localized version of the Wagner Group, if you want to call it that. Basically, like a less sustainable, localized version of, like, the Wagner Group operates at the behest of Russia. So they go to places that Russia wants them to go to, and they exchange security contracts for extraction of natural resources. ISIS, on the other hand, is utilized in a different manner. America and Western countries do a different version of this, where they don't actually send in their guys immediately. First, they create a necessary security environment, and the necessary security environment comes from that local instability. Now, that local instability may or may not come from the hands of ISIS. But ultimately, when ISIS is there, America has to be there as well to combat ISIS. ISIS is simply just a way to threaten and destabilize countries that don't have the same resources to be able to deal with this kind of with these kinds of monstrous acts of terror.
Seen this happen. While the U.S. president did say that this was an attack on Islamists, what he called Islamic terrorists, targeting particularly Christians, the Nigerian foreign minister has sort of also said that this is more on just what he has called attack on terrorists.
Is this public knowledge or just theories? Okay. I'm working off of the same analysis that I have for ISIS in the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria, or ISIL, Islamic State in the Levant. Okay. This is a different variant of it, and it's been around for a very long time. And the Islamic State in Africa has different ties. They don't operate like if ISIS worked alongside NATO countries like Turkey, for example, or have offshoot groups like the FSA that Turkey trained and utilized and deployed in Syria, that was comprised of Turkic nations, all the way, including like Uyghurs, right? From Xinjiang. ISIS is going to have, or not even ISIS, but the Islamic State in Africa, specifically in Nigeria, is going to have different goals, different opinions. It's not comprised of the same people. And the regional players, I dropped my phone. The regional players are not going to be the same either. It's going to be different. But that relies on the idea that ISIS is a deliberate organization that is the same in Iraq as it is in Burkina Faso and Nigeria. And it isn't. It's like saying all groups calling themselves Marxists are a part of the same group. Okay. The ultimate, the goal here, from the way I'm looking at this, is that it is an effort. It is a way to destabilize these countries that want to develop some semblance of sovereignty, or are leveraging relationships that they have with foreign adversaries. They just happen to be in operation all the time. They just happen to be in operation in places where America does not want better relationships with America's adversaries. That's all I'm saying. And yes, at this point, this is absolutely suspicion. This is my suspicion. Wee woo. This is speculation. Okay. There isn't as much hard evidence tying, at least as far as I know, tying the Islamic State operations and numerous other like jihadist groups, okay, in Africa back to, American interests, in the same way that I can directly tie in the aftermath of the global war on terror directly back to America and American allies in the region, okay? Because ultimately Israel is right there. Ultimately, Turkey is right there. These are profoundly important allies for the United States of America. So, there is that element. As far as like Sahel, you could even make an argument that this is French intelligence intervention. There is also that as well, because a lot of the countries that these guys operate in, like Burkina Faso, for example, are French, former French colonies. And they are the ones who are trying to develop sovereignty away from France, for example, and they're getting destroyed, okay? Like Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traore is having a very difficult time combating Islamic terror in his country right now, okay? And it has absolutely gotten way worse since he took over and said he wanted to be a sovereign country and develop sovereignty from France.
Attacks recorded in Africa in the first 5 months of 2018. Many are by groups fighting in the ongoing civil wars in South Sudan and the Central African Republic. Others are riots against governments in southeastern Africa. But these are different.
This is from 7
They're
years
attacks
ago.
by Islamist militant groups. Some claim to be branches of the Islamic State, while others claim to be Al-Qaeda. Both groups are usually associated with the Middle East, but for the past decade, Islamist militant groups have been spreading across Africa, where they've continued to find places to organize and launch attacks. Their success has pushed these fragile states into deeper turmoil, and it's made the region one of the most dangerous in the world. To understand how these terrorist groups got to Africa and why they're so successful there, it helps to start in Nigeria. Nigeria has the biggest population and economy in Africa. Wealth industry and major cities are mostly in the south, while the north is poor, marginalized, isolated, and home to most of Nigeria's Muslim population. It was here that a radical Islamist group called Boko Haram took shape and turned violent in 2009. They started razing villages, slaughtered men and women, and kidnapped children who were forced to carry out suicide attacks. The Nigerian government cracked down, but the group continued to grow. In 2014, they got international attention when they kidnapped close to 300 schoolgirls in Chibok.
Isn't Algeria packed with them too? My mother is a judge at the Algerian Supreme Court and she gets tons of terrorists. Oh, Algeria is unfortunately also a deep vein for, yes, this kind of, no, it's not a don't say that situation. Yes. Like modern Algeria definitely has a lot of issues with this as well. Isn't France the only country that still has almost full power over their colonies and have their own Rothschilds to exploit the resources of such colonies? Yes and no. I mean, these colonies still have all of their finances handled by the French. Yes, and if you know anything about the French, they never forgive a country for liberating itself, whether it be Haiti or even Algeria.
276.
Thank you, Ozzy Chidit, for the 50
By then,
subs.
they controlled a huge swath of territory in northern Nigeria, where they imposed strict Sharia law and declared it an Islamic caliphate. In 2015, they became affiliated with the Islamic State, which had a caliphate of its own in Iraq and Syria. Within a few years, the group killed nearly 25,000 people and was on track to become the deadliest terror group in the world, eventually surpassing ISIS. 5 African countries backed by the US, UK, and France formed a task force to battle Boko Haram. By April 2015, they'd liberated major towns and seemed to push Boko Haram out. But 3 years later, Boko Haram is still active. The group had shifted its focus to the Lake Chad region, one of the poorest places in the world. The lake touches the borders of Nigeria, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon, but none of the state governments have any real presence here. This is where Boko Haram is operating. They've been raiding local villages for food and capturing men to serve as fighters. In 2016, the group split into two. As Boko Haram's attacks grew more and more violent, this group, the Islamic State West Africa, started offering protection to villages in danger. They also provided stability and even water supplies to a region collapsing under a food crisis in exchange for attacks and recruits. In the absence of a strong central government, they've moved further into Nigeria and Niger, where they've launched attacks of their own and are...
This is a video from 7 years ago from Vox, talking about Islamist militant groups gaining strength in Africa. And even Boko Haram itself is like, Boko Haram itself, if I'm not mistaken, is also an offshoot that turned into its own thing, its own separate thing. But they're all offshoots of like the same Daesh, ISIS, Al-Qaeda style forms of militancy. We saw many different versions of this in Syria. HDS is a direct example of this. HDS was an offshoot of ISIS-affiliated groups, al-Nusra, in Syria. And the common principle, I guess, is that they all are HDS is an offshoot of Al-Qaeda. Sorry. Well, yeah, Al Qaeda. Al Nusra was Al Qaeda, and HDS is an offshoot of Al Nusra, isn't it? Yes, Al Nusra is an offshoot of Al Qaeda in Syria. Yes, they left Al Qaeda in 2016 and formed HDS in 2017. HDS was an offshoot of an Al Qaeda affiliate, and ISIS itself is an offshoot of Al Qaeda as well.
Are officially affiliated with the Islamic State. Exploiting and terrorizing locals in ungoverned areas has become a successful strategy, keeping these militant groups active. But it doesn't stop here. The strategy is being used by terrorists all across the continent. Lake Chad is part of the Sahel, a narrow band of territory that stretches across north-central Africa. The conditions that make Lake Chad ideal for Boko Haram and ISWA extend across this whole region. The population is mostly Muslim and vulnerable. Ethnic conflicts are rampant, food is scarce, poverty is rife, and most importantly, there's almost no presence of a government. Islamist militant groups have been filling these spaces at a staggering pace. 7 years ago, Islamist militant groups took over northern Mali and declared it a caliphate for 10 months, before a French military intervention drove them back into the desert. Today, they've banded together and are affiliated with Al Qaeda. A group called ISGS broke away and is now affiliated with the Islamic State. This part of Mali remains ungoverned and violent 7 years after the intervention. Both of these groups are fighting for various militias in the conflict. Meanwhile, both are attacking foreigners, including the French embassy in 2018 and the 2017 ambush of the U.S. Special Forces in Niger.
Fox News is learning that 12 U.S. soldiers, mostly Green Berets, were ambushed by...
Most of these groups in Africa were originally founded as unlinked before proclaiming allegiance to a leader such as Baghdadi or the Taliban. For Boko Haram, this was done during the height of ISIS power and was then rescinded. A lot of groups did this. Okay, but they're operational. They're the only operational forms of Islamic State militancy right now. And the main Islamic State telegrams and the main Islamic State propaganda outlets directly celebrate their operations in Africa. And now they are responsible for 90% of all ISIS operations. Because almost all of the ISIS operations, almost all the Islamic State operations in Iraq, Syria, and also all around the globe have been reduced to virtually nothing. Okay. And since last year, I think last year Africa was around 70%, and now it's 88%.
by a larger force of ISIS-linked militants.
Islamist militant groups are finding success in other ungoverned spaces as well. ISIS claims to have launched 10 attacks in 2018 in Libya, where a civil war has raged since 2011. In Somalia, an ISIS-affiliated group split from Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda.
Yeah, shouts out the Hillary Rodham Clinton on that one. But ISIS is not a real organization at this point. This is what I'm trying to explain. It's like how right-wingers refer to Antifa as an organization despite having no central links or organizational ties. Sure, but they don't have to be. They don't have to be because they're doing what we understand as terrorism. And because of that, they don't have to have like a central governance structure at all. They can operate in a decentralized manner. And I don't even think that they're decentralized or as decentralized as you say they are. HTS, Taliban, Muqawama have been against Daesh since its formation. Ironically, Israeli funded the Middle East factions of Daesh. I would be surprised if Westerners and Israeli had proxy vendors funneling Daesh decentralized network. I mean, look at the RSF. Look at the RSF in Sudan. Okay, we know now, without any suspicion whatsoever, that they are directly being funded by the United Arab Emirates. Someone is giving these guys weapons.
Group. It's made this whole part of Africa one of the most dangerous places in the world. The US and France have both stepped up their presence with several military bases across the Sahel. But drone strikes and special forces alone are not the solution to the Islamist terrorism in Africa. As long as there are places with poverty, conflicts, and no government, terrorist groups will be here.
Yeah, and then obviously, as long as they're there needs to be Western intervention because these countries are not wealthy enough, powerful enough, and have been kept poor aggressively through colonial exploits that they don't have the tools to be able to combat against this kind of terror. And we here in the West look at that and go, oh, it's because they're kind of barbaric and they just can't deal with it because they're just like, this is how it is, you know, they're black, they're aggressive. That's why there's so much violence. Or they're brown, they're Arab. They don't know any better. That's the reason why they're killing each other. You need a Western force to come in and tame the beast. Not dissimilar to how the British colonialists actually presented that argument. You know, the white savior, the white man's burden. If they come in and tame these backwards cultured, violent barbarians.
Because according to the government, these attacks have not just targeted Christians, but they've also impacted Muslims also. Sokoto, where this happened, is a state seen to have more Muslim majority. In fact, the Nigerian Sultan, that's sort of the spiritual head of Muslims.
Hasan, the RSF is an appendage of the Sudan military. They sell gold to the UAE. Then that makes his way into Europe. Wait, what are you talking about? I know all of this. I have talked about all of this. You don't understand the Sudan conflict on a fundamental level? My favorite, it was an appendage of the Sudan army, and now they're fighting what remains of the Sudan army. But what is crazy about this is like what's crazy about all of this is like it's just like chatters will come in and repeat the things that I've talked about before back to me as though I'm like, they are backwards though. Not to say we aren't, but like they are. Dude, we need to do something about groups like this, in my opinion. Why the can't we just like use the sats to drone strike these groups? I don't get it. The average Ameribrain. Man, these groups are one of the only times I don't like seeing US troops killed. These guys are true evil. 25-month subscriber. Brother. Death and destruction is death and destruction. Like, what do you mean? How the do you justify Western intervention in this situation? It's Western intervention that plays a role in developing the volatility to begin with. It's literally Western intervention that causes these places to be dirt poor. Okay? There is individual mismanagement from these puppet states in many instances as well, because they are puppets to the West that then bring in further economic Western intervention, IMF loans and the like, relegate complete control over how things are supposed to be governed in these countries that are resource-rich countries, and therefore they want a pliant leader to allow Western capital to come in and do whatever the they want, so that you can have the cheapest resources, the cheapest minerals that you can possibly get, so your iPhone prices are manageable. They come in with the World Bank and IMF. And if someone doesn't comply with those demands, they kill them, and then they put a new person in charge that will comply. Nowadays, there's at least somewhat of an alternative out there that is offering better loans, loans that they will forgive, loans without the additional demands being made, that play a better role in developing these countries. And America doesn't like that. And instead of competing against China, especially when these countries leverage the relationships that they have with China against the West, instead of competing with them by offering similar loans, for example, they just go in and do what they do best, which is shit up. But even the barbaric nature of the Sahel region is not because of genetic inferiority or cultural inferiority. It's a direct consequence of their material conditions. It's a direct consequence of these areas not being allowed to develop and improve on their material conditions, is because it's much better for whichever foreign interest to consistently dominate them and steal their natural resources. So the very fact that this volatility creates a breeding ground for extremist terrorism, for example, is also still created by Western intervention in the first place. You create the conditions for extremism to manifest. Then you might even help get them. You might help like with the logistics necessary to start building these groups. Then those groups wreak havoc. Then you turn around and say, "Hey, we now have to have direct military intervention here because you can't deal with it on your own because you have no money." And the instability continues. Another significant component to understand the conflict in Nigeria is the farmer-herder dynamic. A significant portion of the violence is over land use. The pastoralist groups are primarily Muslim, and the farmers are mixed but largely Christian. This is the angle that right-wingers in the West are exploiting to create a religious dimension and genocide of Christians. Yeah. I actually don't agree with China's loans either. They only forgive the loan if the country had the loan, gives China whatever was built. That is definitely some America stuff. Yeah, but the level of intervention China demands is clearly, in the eyes of these countries and their rulers, far better than the American, far better than the conditions that the United States is offering. Don't you think that these guys would still work with the United States of America, regardless of its history of chattel slavery or additional violence? They're not stupid. America's just not offering them better loans.
In the country resides there, and that's where that's sort of the background of what has happened. But many people see this, some people from conversations we're seeing see this as a welcomed partnerships, as Nigeria has really been trying to clamp down on insurgency for years now.
Yeah, just talk us through a little bit more.
Oh yeah, Nigeria is also a very socially conservative country with a white savior attitude, so the national consensus of the strike is quite positive. Oh yeah, I didn't even get into that part. Yeah, all I'll say is this. If you look at every country on the planet, Nigeria, amongst African nations, is the only one where there is a positive approval of Israel. That's all I'm going to say about it. That doesn't mean that, Western intervention is justified. But if you do actually hear justifications for Western intervention from Nigerian mouthpieces that are doing propaganda for said Western intervention, understand that that's where it's coming from. That's not true. That's literally true. That is true. Nigeria is 50% Christian, 50% Muslim. That poll was done in the Christian area. I mean, certainly. I'm just saying that there is, there is an argument that, you will most likely hear in a similar style like Venezuela, you will hear from Nigerians being like, this is actually a good thing, potentially. So I just hope you understand where that's coming from. All right. Wait, what the why is this black? Hold on. I'm going to read this Financial Times article. Hold on. Okay. Why bomb Sokoto? Trump strikes baffle Nigerians. U.S. missile attacks on Christmas Day hit a part of Nigeria's northwest that is almost entirely Muslim. It was around 10 p.m. on Christmas Day when residents of the mainly Muslim village of Jabo in Sokoto State, northwest Nigeria, noticed an object resembling a small aircraft flying overhead. Shortly after, we heard a loud explosion and a huge ball of fire, one resident told local media. Everyone was terrified. People rushed out of their houses with their families and started running in different directions. The scene, repeated in at least 2 other settlements in the Sokoto state, which borders Nigeria's neighbor Niger, were a part of what Donald Trump, U.S. president, called a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria. The U.S. military said in its initial assessment that multiple ISIS members had been killed in the strikes on extremist camps. However, residents of Jabo professed surprise at the strike, saying that the bombs had landed in empty fields, causing no casualties, and that Jabo had been relatively shielded from violence. The last attack by militants had occurred 2 years ago, they said. Video footage on Nigerian television showed pieces of burnt metal in what looked like farmland. One man told Arise News, a local television station, "Glory be to God, there was no loss of life." Major General Samaila Uba, the Nigerian military's director of defense information, appeared to confirm Abuja's close involvement. Nigeria's armed forces, in conjunction with the U.S., had carried out the strike based on credible intelligence and careful operational planning, he said. This came after, by the way, just so you understand. Like, the Nigerian government was like, oh, yeah, we were actually involved in this. They said it afterwards. Yes, Nigeria has, around all the countries, Nigeria has the one of the most positive attitudes about Israel. Where is it? One of the most favorable attitudes about Israel. Yeah. Nigeria's at 59% approval, with 24% saying very favorable, and 18% or 32% disapproval. Uba went on to say that the precision strike operations against identified foreign ISIS-linked elements had received approval from the federal government authorities. The operation underscored Nigeria's resolve, alongside strategic partners, to confront transnational terrorism and prevent foreign fighters from establishing or expanding footholds within Nigeria's borders, he said. Yet some Nigerian analysts questioned the defense ministry's official version of events, saying the choice of Sokoto state as a target was strange, given that its residents were almost entirely Muslim. Other states, including Niger and Kebbi in the northwest and Borno in the northeast, where Boko Haram has historically been active, had been the victims of much more violence, they said. Nigeria has been subject for at least a decade to overlapping security crises in a mixture of banditry, kidnappings, clashes between herders and farmers, and Islamist extremism. Last year, nearly 9,500 people were killed in political violence, according to ACLED, a nonprofit that tracks global conflict. Muslims, as well as Christians, have been victims. Trump said U.S. actions were in response to what he called terrorist activity directed against Christians, a long preoccupation of his White House. That's one way to put it. The strikes came a day after a bomb attack on a mosque in Maiduguri in northeast Nigeria, in which at least 5 people were reported to have been killed and dozens injured. In November, gunmen kidnapped at least 200 children from a Catholic school in Niger State. Mustafa Gembu, a security analyst, said the choice of Sokoto was highly questionable. Sokoto was more a victim of banditry than of terrorists targeting Christians, who were almost non-existent in the state, he said. It was not what he called one of the country's terrorist hotspots, but rather a predominantly Muslim enclave and the historical seat of the Sokoto Caliphate, a spiritual center of Islam in Nigeria. Since Trump in November threatened to deploy the U.S. military guns blazing in response to attacks on our cherished Christians, the Nigerian government has been under strong U.S. pressure to act against the violence. Bola Tinubu, the president, dispatched senior security officials to Washington to discuss the situation and replaced his defense minister with a former general. But despite the public claims on Friday of coordination, Gembu said he doubted whether the Nigerian armed forces had been closely involved in the planning of the strikes. I don't think they were. That's why I said I don't really trust the Nigerian government being like, no, totally, we wanted this. Umar Ado, an opposition politician, also said he was unconvinced that Nigeria was actively involved. The targeting of Sokoto State with no prior established ISIS presence raises questions about whether Nigerian military authorities do exercise meaningful control over the operation or they are themselves mere onlookers, he said. Otto said Tinubu owed the nation a full and detailed explanation of the legal basis, authorization process, and strategic rationale for the reported U.S. airstrikes in Sokoto. Other branches of Nigeria's government were slower than the defense ministry to claim full responsibility for coordinating the operation. One senior government official, speaking on background, said he was trying to establish the facts, including precisely when Abuja had been informed about the timing and location of the strikes. Nigeria had been involved in intelligence gathering operations in conjunction with the U.S. in recent weeks, he said, but he acknowledged that Sokoto was not the most obvious choice of target. The foreign ministry was also more circumspect about its involvement, saying only that it continues to work closely with its partners to establish diplomatic and security channels to weaken terrorist networks. However, it stopped short of saying explicitly that it had prior knowledge about when or where these attacks would take place. Until now, the Trump administration's military focus in Africa has largely been in Somalia. There's some drama there as well, but that's for a different day. In May, U.S. Admiral James Kilby said Washington had launched the largest airstrike in the history of the world, 125,000 pounds from a single aircraft carrier into Somalia. After the strikes on Nigeria, the U.S. released a video showing what appeared to be a missile being fired from a ship. Gembu, the security analyst, said witnesses in Jabo had reported seeing both drones and missiles and that the strikes may have been a combination of the two. Contrary to U.S. claims that multiple ISIS terrorists were killed in the ISIS camps, Gembu said no casualties have been reported. In Tangaza, scene of a separate strike from Jabo, one part of the bush that had been hit was still smoldering, he said. So PR strikes for the most part. And the reality of the matter is, when we're talking about Africa, when we're talking about African nations, there's even less interest in recognizing their humanity. So you're just like, I mean, I'm glad that nobody seemingly died, according to the Financial Times reporting. But even if there were, Muslim farmers or whatever that had been killed in these strikes, the American government would just say, oh, they're just ISIS, they were just killing ISIS people. And they'd most likely move on. Peace, President.
Of that background, I suppose some of the history that's led up to this.
Well, for more than 10 years, we have seen groups, jihadist groups like Boko Haram, Islamic State, West Africa Province, popularly known as ISWAP, and other groups that have been cropping up, launching attacks on people in schools, in churches, in mosques. In fact, just a couple of days ago, there was what was said to be a suicide bomb attack in a mosque, While no group has claimed responsibility for it, this sort of situation isn't entirely uncommon in Borno State, which is where this mosque attack happened. So for more than a decade, Nigeria has been battling this, and it's been from groups that are trying to sort of install their ideology in the region, but the Nigerian military has been pushing back, and there seems to be sort of another rise of these attacks in recent years, which is potentially why I guess the US government is now.
Why no socialistic reform happening in Nigeria and all these African countries? What the do you mean? Brother, these are places that had endless revolutionary potential. There are many countries in Africa that actually did successfully have not just like a socialistic reform, but a straight up revolution. They got killed. They got destroyed. They got slaughtered. And then puppets were placed in their stead over and over and over again. They're still researching it in the science tree. It takes some time. Yeah.
Trump said
That's how it goes. South Africa has some socialist tendencies. Unfortunately, that was supposed to be a successful socialist revolution. But due to it being a reformist movement at the end of it, it actually completely dropped all of its socialist tendencies. And that is the reason why South Africa still has a ton of economic issues and basically re-solidified the exact same economic disparity that existed in the country in the apartheid structure. All you got was a couple new black billionaires on top of the primarily white billionaires that run the country. This is a major issue with South Africa still to this day, is all of the arable land, all the valuable land belongs still primarily to the white population, which is under 10%, but they own 90% of all of the most valuable land.
the US hit Islamic State in Nigeria because they were targeting primarily innocent Christians. But is this true? We fact-checked it. The US has targeted IS in...
One missing aspect of this, Nigerian separatists have been funding lobbyists to promote the narrative of Christian persecution to the Trump admin. Nigeria scrambles for U.S. influence without ambassador or lobbyists. Nigeria's lack of a senior diplomatic presence in Washington under President Bola Tinubu and an absence of lobbyist support has left it vulnerable to U.S. President Donald Trump's threat of military action over alleged Christian persecution. It is pretty crazy that if you don't have like a couple $1 billion laying around where you can just like give them, I don't know, like a gold-plated armor or like a gold-plated plane or something, you're just completely left out in the dark. And Trump will literally just listen to anyone who has enough money to reach his ear. It's great. It's awesome. What a fantastic way to operate, dude. What a fantastic way to operate. Abuja is scrambling to appoint an ambassador to the U.S. after 2 years without one. The move is part of a broader push by Abuja to appoint ambassadors to missions abroad this month. Regulatory filings examined by Semaphore show the Nigerian government has had little to no lobbyist representation in Washington since Tinubu took office in 2023. Instead, Nigeria has been outspent in Washington by Biafra separatist groups who, according to the filings, have focused on raising the issue of Christian killings on Capitol Hill to chime with a long-running narrative of conservative Christian circles. One longtime Washington lawyer who has worked with African governments described Nigeria's lack of senior representation of lobbyists in Trump's first year as shocking. By the way, they literally did do this with white genocide in South Africa. And instead, because South Africa does have lobbyists and South Africa does have ambassadors in a relationship with the United States of America, they were able to cut out the middleman, and it wasn't even lobbyists. They did it through white supremacist influencer networks, which is even dumber than taking advantage of the lack of direct correspondence between two nation heads. It is insane, and it worked. That's why Trump was running around talking about white genocide in South Africa. That's how stupid it is. One longtime Washington lawyer who has worked with African governments described Nigeria's lack of senior representation or lobbyists in Trump's first year as shocking. Cameron Hudson, a former White House Africa director, said that lobbyists could have given the Tinubu administration a better read of the situation in Washington. It is not an error to be casual about your diplomacy in Washington, he said. Tinubu recalled all of Nigeria's ambassadors months after taking office in 2023, and those posts, including at key security and trade partner countries like the US and UK, have remained vacant. Nigeria has instead relied on career civil servants at more than 100 foreign embassies and consulates to manage diplomatic affairs, an approach Foreign Minister Yusuf Tugar defended in an interview with Semaphore in October. It's not the case that all ambassadors need to be political appointees, he said. The strategy has raised concerns about Nigeria's foreign policy architecture in wider circles, but had not prompted an altered approach from the government until Trump threatened to review U.S. citizens in Nigeria. Tucker's office did not respond to Semaphore's request for comment on the reported move to appoint ambassadors. A list of potential candidates have been resurfaced. A person close to Nigerian presidency told Semaphore, adding that lobbying is happening for plum posts. Ebenezer Obadare, an analyst with the Council of Foreign Relations of Washington, said Nigeria's institutional failings at home had exacerbated the situation on the global stage. Having an ambassador in Washington may not have forestalled the Trump verbal onslaught on Nigeria, but full diplomatic presence would have helped the country anticipate the country of particular concern designation and develop a game plan. Nigeria was bombed for an amazing reason. Yes. Separatists from Nigeria's southeast region have harked back to the country's Civil War era breakaway territory, which was called Biafra, and invested in lobbyists in Washington to push their cause on Capitol Hill and with the media. One filing showed the Biafra Republic government in exile, which is headed by Finland-based activists, paid Washington lobbyists Moran Global Strategies $10,000 a month over the last year. The communications showed that while they have championed their separatists as persecuted Igbo ethnic group, they have also made a point of claiming that they are being persecuted because of their Christian religion. In one letter to Hill staffers, the group claims that Nigeria's persecution of Christians continues to worsen. Shouts out to Nicki Minaj for that as well. Congratulations. There is a lot of involvement from the Nigerian diaspora as well, especially the wealthy southeastern Igbo diaspora. There remains a lot of resentment over the Biafra War and the crushing of the separatists by the northern-dominated army. Yeah. As is the case with violence that took place in South Africa that Donald Trump presented as white genocide, and that's an easier narrative for Americans to understand because it's white versus black. This narrative here is virtually identical. These are poor countries. There's a lot of instability. There's a lot of volatility. There's sectarian fighting. There's ethnic tension, and most importantly, there's always going to be people who are being dominated, and the landed gentry that actually dominates them. And in that process, Trump will look at that and go, "Oh, Muslim Islamist terrorists are killing Christians." No, they're not. They're killing Muslims as well as Christians. They're killing everybody. You genuinely don't understand this? It's not the same parallel? Okay. I mean, if there's anything that I'm missing here, you can elaborate. But everything that I read on this before going live today led me to believe that this statement is consistent. Senior advisor to the United States President Donald Trump on Arab and African affairs, Masad Boulos, had described the allegations of religious persecution in Nigeria as misguided and inconsistent with the realities on the ground, affirming that terrorism in the country affects citizens of all faiths and ethnicities. And we actually saw that. We saw that with the targeting that took place. A couple days prior to this, there was a bomb that exploded in a mosque that killed Muslims. Obviously, there's no Christians in the mosque. 5 Muslims, a dozen other Muslim casualties in the process of the terror attack. But prior to that, they had actually kidnapped a bunch of Christian children from a Christian school. So it's not like as directional as the way that I think Western reporting or the State Department presents it as. And for the record, this has always been what? Boulos is Lebanese, by the way? Your theory is correct? Stop! Bro. Oh, another Lebanese person. Another Lebanese person in a pivotal role. Another Lebanese person in a pivotal role, dude. Oh, his daughter-in-law is Tiffany Trump. Wait. Yeah, he's very fluent in Arab. He's in charge of the Morocco-Algeria conflict. Oh, dude. He's also all over Libya too, right? The Great Lebanese-ment. Yeah, the Great Lebanese Replacement. Yeah, it's Lebanon-occupied government, dude. Anyway, we're going to move on from the Nigeria situation in a second and get into the Epstein files because Donald Trump is losing his mind over that too. This brings back into attention just what exactly Austin Show does for work. Oh my God. Morgan is a moderator of mine. And as you guys know, Frogan is also Lebanese. Oh my God, what have I done? The infiltration was even here. The infiltration is everywhere. Mother of God. What is happening? Welcome to the Lebanese occupation. Yeah.
3 different countries, Syria, Somalia, and Nigeria, in the span of 1 week. But it's only after the strike in Nigeria that Trump mentioned IS killing Christians. The US military's Africa Command said the strike on Sokoto State took place in coordination with Nigerian authorities and killed multiple IS militants. But a journalist on the ground told us that one of the communities hit has never been affected by insecurity.
They're killing record numbers of Christians in Nigeria.
The US military strike comes weeks after Trump warned that Christianity faces an existential threat in Nigeria and threatened to military intervene, he says, over the failure to stop violence targeting Christian communities. After the operation, Trump posted on Truth Social that the United States launched a powerful and deadly strike against ISIS terrorist scum in northwest Nigeria, who have been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians at levels not seen for many years and even centuries. So according to data, are Trump's claims of Christians primarily being targeted in Nigeria even remotely true? Nigeria is roughly split between a Muslim population predominantly living in the north and a Christian population living in the south. Each dot on this map marks an incident of militia violence, including Islamic State, West Africa Province, and Boko Haram attacks. And the spread of dots across the map suggests that violent attacks, including forced abductions and sexual violence, are more evenly spread across Muslim.
I think this kind of narrative, like, oh, we got to defend our big, beautiful Christians in Nigeria, is also stupid, because I don't think a lot of people, I don't think a lot of these people, like Americans, give a shit. You know what I mean? As I said before, okay, let's say we have a mass exodus of Nigerian Christians that come into the United States of America. You think all of these people that supposedly care about Christianity are going to be up for that? No. Yeah. They don't give a shit. I don't think they give a shit at all. That narrative didn't even work with Arab Christians. That narrative didn't even work with a Syrian Christian population. Okay? It did not work at all for Americans. And Americans, by and large, have even more hatred for black people in general than they do for Arabs. Okay? They hate Arabs quite a bit, but they really, really, I mean, anti-blackness is foundational, right? So these guys don't give a They don't give a about this whole, like, oh, we're defending Christianity. It's just a talking point for them.
Muslim and Christian areas in Nigeria. In fact, there are a higher number of attacks taking place in Muslim areas, 1,628 incidents versus 865 attacks in Christian areas, according to data from December 2025. This chart tracking
we have to defend our big, beautiful Christian boys and girls in a foreign land. Welcome back, 13th century foreign policy.
Attacks suggest that since 2024,
I mean, it
the
never
number
went
of
away.
mosque attacks overtook attacks on churches. The figures also include
Christians ended slavery when the world said it was okay. Muslims were enslaving people because of their religious text law. It's to save Nigeria, not to bring them here. This guy has a lot of good. This guy has a lot of good takes. Yeah, no. Famously, especially for us Americans, famously Christianity didn't play a formative role in defending white supremacist chattel slavery as an institution. That's awesome. Yeah. Guy who definitely has no stake in this and isn't brain broken. Yeah, chattel slavery, famously not defended by the Bible, okay?
And on Christmas Eve, a bomb exploded in a mosque in Maiduguri, the capital of Borno State, killing at least 5 people.
Bro was homeschooled. I don't think he was schooled at all.
Conflict location and event data monitor just doesn't support Trump's claims of Christians in Nigeria being disproportionately targeted by terrorist groups. In spite of the reality on the ground, Trump seems to be appealing to evangelical Christian supporters who've long condemned violence against Christians in Nigeria. And in November, he designated...
Yeah, Nigeria is basically run by Shell. They had mass protests in the 90s, and Amnesty International uncovered that Shell financed militias that rape, kidnap, and kill protesters, and all those protests were happening because they destroyed the Nigerian environment. Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, Shell has literally tapped into... to tribal leadership, to create banditry directly in Nigeria at times when they felt like they wanted to cause a little bit of instability. So the notion that this is not you know, the notion that this is not like Western backed is silly, in my opinion. But once again, it's pure speculation. It's pure speculation. And it's Cloud Districts in Georgia says, it's crazy that we're bombing other countries for domestic political points, not even some international policy, just to get the hogs in Arkansas to get excited. And my point is, it's even dumber than that, because I don't even think this gives you brownie points. I don't think the hogs, the quote unquote Christian hogs in Arkansas give a about Nigerian Christians, like even as a talking point, because ultimately they see it as, you know, they're black. Who gives a like, that's literally, this is not even an issue that will reach a level of salience. This is not an issue that, you know, people are going to turn around and be like really on board with or get really invested with. It's no different than when they try to do PR for the Syrian Christians, like the American Enterprise Institute was like, yeah, we got to save the Syrian Christians by doing more intervention in Syria. And I don't think anybody even remembers when they were doing that, right? Do you remember that at all? I do, but I'm a nerd, and it didn't work because Americans don't give a
Nigeria a country of particular concern over the alleged persecution of Christians, and instructed the Pentagon to prepare for...
Why do leftists have the urge to blame America for every little thing that goes wrong in the world? I'm Nigerian, and these terrorists are funded by Muslim elites in the north, not by the U.S. There was a whole investigation that revealed financiers last week. Oh. This is why I said, listen, you're going to hear a lot of, as a Nigerian, we welcome American intervention in the country. Okay? I wonder why leftists always find a way to blame the United States of America, the most powerful nation on the planet that has its fingers in every single endeavor. Every single one. Yeah. I wonder why. I'm actually Nigerian. I know, dude. I know. I'm not shocked by your commentary here. I'm telling you. We talk about, man, we talk about America intervening in Venezuela, and everyone's like, as a Venezuelan, we welcome Caracas being reduced to rubble, please. Why are you blaming America for this American strike? You're right. I think America should keep blowing up random Muslim farmland over and over again to try to desperately scrounge some W's for the American heartland that will get excited at the prospect of defending the Nigerian Christian population from afar. This will solve the issue. And for the record, before people doubt that he's Nigerian, I have no doubt that he is Nigerian.
Possible action in Nigeria and threatened to cut U.S. aid. The Nigerian government has publicly acknowledged that it cooperated with the U.S. on precision hits in Sokoto state, while maintaining the line that armed groups target both Muslims and Christians in the West African country.
The United States.
Anyway, you didn't care when Muslims and Christians were being killed mercilessly. You guys didn't care as soon as Trump got involved. Now everyone's an expert in terrorism in Nigeria. And for the record, I hate Trump. Oh, my mistake. What's your solution? As a Nigerian person, what do you think is the best idea? Do you think more American intervention, direct American intervention, is a better alternative? Where's Daddy Hasan? Where's Daddy Hasan? I want my father. When are we going to talk about Nigeria? Talk about Nigeria, bro. Talk about Nigeria, bro. From the river to the sea, from the river to the sea. Talk about Nigeria. I start talking about Nigeria. Why the f are you talking about Nigeria? You didn't care when Muslims and Christians were being killed mercilessly. You guys didn't care. I guess this didn't go the way you wanted it to go. I think America should help us develop economically that will solve terrorism like how they helped Japan and South Korea. Oh, well, I don't completely disagree with you. Yes, I do agree with you. It's just that American economic intervention has never actually, in Africa especially, has never been as helpful. It's more so just helpful to line up Western capitals' pockets. But you're not wrong. Yes, that is a much more favorable way to intervene. I wish America would intervene in a peaceful manner and of that sort through economic cooperation, through develop and aid the Nigerian government so they can have full-blown sovereignty over their own territory. I just don't think that they're going to do that. I think it's just going to be shell corporation owned in perpetuity. But, you know, you want America to do China in Nigeria. Maybe they will. Probably not, though. Isn't this the guy that abuses dog? Yes. I'm the guy. You're at the right stream. All right. She woke up. Oh, speaking of abuse, also, Kai got a ton of gifts for Christmas. Look at this shit. Number 1, handheld dog treat launcher. Okay. This is so I can shoot her when I'm done shocking her and I'm shocking the world. Okay. When I'm done shocking her and electrocuting her, I can shoot her directly in the face with treats. That's number 1. Numbers 2 and 3. A little beef stick. Well, not even a stick. Ziwi venison shank bone. I wonder if she has any idea what this is. And also a Peaks and Paws premium dog chew for dogs under 80 pounds, X large Echo Pack. It's one of those chew things. But last but not least, the craziest one is the holiday doggy donuts from the Dog Bakery. And this shit looks appetizing as so much so that I want to taste it first, you know, just to make sure it's not poison. You feel me? Kaya, come here. Look at this. Bro, this is delicious. What the fuck? Oh my God. Yeah, phantom tax. That's actually good. That's pretty crazy. Laura Loomer impression? Dude, what the fuck is this made with? Ingredients you'll love: wheat flour, baking soda, baking powder, applesauce, honey, shortening, peanut butter, carob chips, yogurt chips, and sprinkles. Is actually like high Kirk. That shit was bomb. Okay? Not even a joke. That shit was actually bomb. Don't eat it? I did. Look at her fat ass enjoying it. It just tastes like apple-y. Her fat ass is not less than 80 pounds. Yeah, she's 120 pounds. What of it? Anyway. Hasan Reactions is one of the best ones in the React channel.